talk about
So when it comes to public policy, what do you care about? You care about guns, the environment, education reform, healthcare, the gap between the rich and the poor? Whatever you care about, there's one other thing I propose you ought to care about too, because it's at the root of every single issue in politics. I'm talking about the vote, which is our system of public elections to figure out who gets to represent us and make all those other choices on our behalf. The vote is the container in which all of politics happens, and it's broken. So earlier this year, Princeton and Northwestern released a study demonstrating that our government operates on behalf of a whole constellation of special interests, and not on behalf of we the people as a whole. That time and time again, the will of the majority, which is often a broad consensus across political ideologies, is thwarted by manipulation on behalf of the wealthy few. This was not the deal from the beginning. The founders actually laid down a very specific set of requirements to make sure that our government did not operate on behalf of the few at the expense of the many. And chief amongst these is the principle of one person, one vote. That in the selection of our representatives, our votes are to carry equal weight. But they don't. There are fundamental inequalities in the weight of the vote itself that lead to hyperpartisanship and provide fertile ground for special interest manipulations. So the test for equality of weight is balance. Therefore, in order for our voting system to provide us all with an equal weight vote, for whatever way you can vote in an election, there must exist a counterbalancing vote I can cast that leaves the outcome the same before and after we both vote, right? So a choice between two passes this simple equality test. You vote for Alice, I vote for Bob, we exactly balance each other out, and so the overall election result reflects the will of the majority. But because we're limited to one choice, every time there are more than two candidates, the more similar ones split supporters' votes. So this is the spoiler effect inequality. That choice limit of one creates a vote that's impossible to balance. And we know this, right? It actually gives more power to people who like one candidate than to people who like more than one. So that's why we're told, don't waste your vote on some candidate you might actually really like, and instead vote for the lesser evil in order to prevent your worst option from coming to pass. This gives an unavoidable, insurmountable advantage to the money. Because who's the lesser evil? Simply the more tolerable of the two front-runner candidates with the biggest financial war chests, who are therefore most beholden to well-funded special interests. Independents without big backing don't even get a fair count. Instead, they're vilified for participating, because as they become more successful, their mere presence on the ballot risks spoiling the outcome and electing the greater evil. It's actually this limit of one choice, this spoiler effect inequality, that leads directly to our one-dimensional, two-party dominated political system. So that's one dimension of inequality, but wait, there's more. We actually have two elections. The first election is called the primary, and it was created more than 100 years ago to give the voters the choice of which candidate from their party went on to the general election. Before the primary, candidates were simply chosen by either party convention or by party insiders in the smoke-filled back rooms. But unfortunately, this effort, this very progressive reform to give more voice to the people has led to another dimension of inequality in the vote, which is partisan exclusion. So right now, almost a third of us are not in a major party. And what's actually just as bad is that the vast majority of our districts are safe. That is, they provide just one party so much of an advantage that whomever is chosen in their primary always wins the general election. And when you add up these two inequalities, more than half of us are silenced, and we get a choice only between two polarized candidates deep in the money's pocket. So not super surprising then that we have a special interest dominated government mired in partisan gridlock. Now, election reform advocates in California and Washington have created a new form of primary election to solve that partisan exclusion problem. Instead of segregating all the voters by major party or not, everyone gets a ballot that shows all the candidates, and then the top 2 move forward to the general election. Now, the choice between the top 2 is always equal, right? The vote between 2 is equal. But what about the primary vote itself? The California system has no requirement that the voters be equal in that first selection stage. Actually, if you look at the stated purpose of the law, it reinforces the limit of one choice, which magnifies that spoiler effect inequality that forces us to choose a lesser evil. And so, since they did that reform, they've experienced increased election costs. Sometimes 2 candidates advance, neither of whom represents the majority view. So that choice of 1 is the simplest rank order voting system, plurality voting. There are other ranking systems like instant runoff voting where you rank multiple candidates in order of your preference, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. But it turns out that no rank order system with more than 2 candidates passes that test for equality of weight, because it's always possible to construct a ranking that has no counterbalancing order. Nobel Prize-winning economist Dr. Kenneth Arrow actually proved that it's impossible to construct a fair rank-ordered voting system. Now, fortunately, there are systems that do not suffer these critical defects. Think about Olympic judging or product reviews on Amazon, or even the very simple like on Facebook. All of these are examples of rating, so attributing to each product or competitor or idea an independent measure of value. And here's the cool part. For every way that you rate a candidate, I can offer a counterbalancing rating. 0 stars to your 5, yes to your no. So unlike the ranking systems, all the rating systems actually pass that equality of weight test. And even the very simplest rating system, simple yes or no, +1 or 0, support or not, lets us communicate something that no ranking can, which is, out of all the choices we have, which ones do we actually approve? And the ballot for that simplest of rating systems looks exactly the same as the ballot we use today, just with the single choice limitation removed. So this isn't just theory. In New York, a couple of years ago, Occupy did a study, an exit poll study, where they asked voters to recast their presidential ballots using our current voting system, plurality voting, as well as a variety of alternate voting methods, including approval voting on each candidate. The results were striking. So while the district clearly, not representative philosophically of the nation as a whole, it demonstrated that that single choice limit overwhelmingly favors the 2 well-funded major party candidates, and also that if voters are given the opportunity to express support to rate equally each candidate, that all the candidates in the race get a fair measure of voter support. And this is backed by the science. So as you might imagine, the field of voting method analysis has advanced considerably in the 200 years since the founding of the country. This chart excerpts the results of the simulation and analysis of more than 50 different voting systems. This was done by a Princeton math PhD named Warren Smith. And what Dr. Smith found is that according to both key performance measures of voting system efficacy, one is the propensity to elect the so-called Condorcet winner, or the candidate who would beat every other candidate in the race if it was just a head-to-head matchup, and the minimization of net social regret at the outcome of the election. According to those 2 metrics, the top 4 spots are all occupied by equal voting methods. Now look at number 41 on the list. So number 41, plurality in top 2, that's the California model. If all we do is remove the single choice limitation, it jumps up to number 2, second best voting system ever characterized, but keeps our same simple ballot format, the simple 2-stage nature of our election system. The only way to make it better is to actually increase the resolution of the choice in that first stage. So 5 stars instead of just a simple check, but that requires a whole new ballot format. So the simplest way to make a top 2 system awesome and actually equal is to just remove the single choice limit. That's it. Instead of making 1 choice per office, you get to look at each candidate individually. So finally, at long last, we'll be able to actually offer support to candidates we really like without having to first ask the question, how much money has this guy raised? Does the media say that she's electable? We can just look at a candidate and think, I like, support. And since we know that to advance, Well, we benefit by supporting at least two. So we can support our actual favorite and maybe a merely acceptable candidate as well, so that in the general election, we might get to choose the more awesome of two greats instead of perpetually the lesser of two evils. And unlike almost every other primary election system, the equal vote does not favor the strategy of voting for a weak opponent. Actually, it's a really dangerous strategy if it's an equal vote, because you run the risk of knocking out your own favorite just as much as getting rid of a candidate you actually fear on the other side. So this isn't all just academic or a kind word to our neighbors north and south about how to make their election systems dramatically better. Oregon will have the opportunity this November to decide whether we as the voters want a top two system of our own. And unlike the California system, Oregon's top two does not require the continuation of the one-choice limit. In fact, quite the opposite. The very first operative paragraph of ballot measure 90 directs the legislature to create an equal vote, not just in the top two, but in all phases of the selection process. How those words got there is the story for another day, but they are there. They were written with full understanding of what equality in the vote means, and we will vote on them. The only challenge is that the measure doesn't actually expressly tell the legislature how to create the equal vote, which is where we come in, because it turns out that the public dialogue, within the bookends of ambiguity, the public dialogue that we have before the vote about the ballot measure is used in the construction of the law after the election. So we're spreading the word about what equality in the voting franchise actually means, the simple test of balance, and the rating systems that pass it. Oregon is a pioneer state. We take pride in blazing new trails. Actually, the initiative and referendum system itself was for many years known as the Oregon system because we did it first. And the bottle bill, and beach access, vote by mail, and our system of land use planning that has curbed the blight and excess of sprawl. Because all US public elections have only ever used rank order voting systems, we can make the equal vote another significant Oregon first. And we might just be able to see what a government of the people, by the people, and for the people actually looks like. Thank you.